gavel. It is Monday, May 8th at 5:30, and I call to order the Communications and Policy Committee of the Concord School Board to order. Our chair, Bob Cotton, is unable to make it today, so I will be stepping in that role. Also with me, actually, should we take attendance, or do I just announce?
You can just announce attendance.
Yeah. Also with us today is board members Ms. Walsh and Mr. Richards, as well as Superintendent Murphy and our Title IX coordinator, Karen Fisher-Anderson. Tonight we're going to be looking at several policies that the district is bringing forward to hopefully workshop so that we can take a look at them all as a group. And with that, I will turn it over to Karen Fisher-Anderson to kind of give us a rundown of what the evening is going to look like.
Great. All right. Thanks, everybody. Let's take the easy issue first. I went back and I watched the tape from your last board meeting, and I know the issue came up about 211.1, which was the policy dealing with exemption from immunization / TB, and you all decided, unfortunately, the minutes hadn't been included in the board book, and so it kind of came to a stall, and so I wanted to explain a little bit about why this policy is in front of us. As you all may recall, when you first came together as this current committee, I had done an update on our Excel spreadsheet with all the policies, and Pam correctly noted that there was a policy that I had written on the sideline where it said not deleted as yet, and that was this 211.1. This policy, the board voted to delete it. It was decided that it would be deleted in 2017, believe it or not, according to Linden, long before my time and Superintendent Murphy's. But unfortunately, the housekeeping, it just never got deleted. The good news is that 211.1 is housed in our health procedures manual. So we're deleting it. The recommendation was deleted as a single policy because it is incorporated into the health procedures manual. We did not really put that on the minutes last time because it was a housekeeping measure, my bust, but I wanted to bring that to your attention so that if you want to take it up to the full board to actually delete this one portion of it as a separate policy, that's the background behind it. And Kathleen, go ahead.
Did a previous board already vote to delete it?
They voted that they accepted it into the health procedures manual, is my understanding. And Kathleen, please jump in because I think you talked. But it was supposed to be deleted by the board. It just never was.
So the board never voted on deleting it?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Health policy.
And that's 211.1.
So a motion from this group to recommend that the full board delete it at their June meeting.
And we didn't do that at the last meeting?
No, you all didn't have the minutes in front of you, and as you were discussing it,
Did this committee do it?
The last
This
committee
committee
meeting.
recommended?
to send it forward.
To the full
Did we
board.
recommend to bring it before the full board for deletion?
Yes.
I believe we did.
Okay.
Then we don't
So
need
then
to
we don't
do it
need to
again.
vote
We
again.
don't need to do it. And the reason that you didn't vote on it was because we didn't have the minutes.
Right.
And we couldn't
Right
remember.
there. And for
None of
some
us-
reason,
yeah, none of
the
us
minutes
could.
were done, they just didn't get into last month's packet, which will be in this month's packet, so.
Yeah. It was just too ambiguous, so I
Yep.
I actually believe that I tabled this.
Yes.
We will need to pull it from the table
Yeah.
Yeah,
next time.
that's right. Okay, I'm gonna make sure I put that in on the board, agenda, that it's a tabled, it was
Yeah.
tabled.
Okay.
And
So
that would have
there's
been
no-
tabled from,
The May 1st meeting.
May 1st meeting.
yep.
And no action is required in this meeting.
Right.
In order to move it any which way.
But we do appreciate you
The
informing us as
context
to
is
what
helpful.
happened.
Yeah, it was long before my time even, but it's a housekeeping measure for sure.
No, it's
So-
before my time.
17?
I was on the board. I don't believe I was on this committee at 17.
Okay. All right.
Let's consider that settled, yeah. Moving
easy.
on.
All right, well, moving on to the next one on the agenda, at number 216, which is the administrative succession plan. In your packets tonight, I provided you both the current, and it says current on it, policy on each of the ones we're going to look at. And then I promise I wasn't trying to be a smart guy. You had asked me to provide some red to highlight the changes. The former policy number 216, or excuse me, the current and existing policy number 216 is entitled Superintendent Absence of. Pam, I believe it was you who brought to our attention that, hey, you know what, we now have 2 superintendents, should we look at this policy? So we did look at it. This, by the way, came into our district. It was adopted back in 1966. The last time it was revised was in 2017. So I took a look at what we had, and then I also went into the New Hampshire School Board Association Bank of Policies. Kathleen and I looked at what was in it, and we came up with, we modified the 216 into what you have as now called Administrative Succession Plan, so even the title has changed. Specifically, when we brought it in front of the committee the first time, you all had requested that we specifically name by position those that would succeed should we have an unplanned either temporary or permanent leadership change. And so I did that under the Administrative Succession Plan portion, which is your second paragraph there. And then we went ahead and incorporated other changes from the policy. Cara was nice enough to go ahead and take a look at this and make some recommended changes and comments. So what you have in front of you are, and Cara, correct me if I'm wrong, please, I worked on it this morning, accepted a lot of the changes, except for you did have a question we can talk about in a minute. But this is the new recommended revised policy, which doesn't, in fact, name the positions who would succeed, and then some additional information on, what we go about doing as a district, who, the announcements that are made, who oversees them. And so I bring that before you all to take a look at and see if it meets with what you were hoping to get in a new version.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm going to give everybody a minute to just read what they have in front of them. And I will also note that Karen, thank you, has incorporated some of my technical changes and answering some of my more substantive questions, just to make things a little more clear, where I maybe thought that language was ambiguous. And so, to me, other than the 2 remaining questions, I'm pretty happy with the way that it's laid out currently.
Well, I will propose an edit to your first question, which is just in the event of the absence of the superintendent, as opposed to the planned or unplanned. I think we can just say in the event of the absence.
Okay.
Or the incapacity. I think Constitution uses incapacity, but
Cara, I did under the last paragraph, under the paragraph that's entitled Unplanned Permanent Leadership Change, number 7 is set off by itself. Instead of being number 7, it's now making clear that the board president is the official spokesperson, so I moved that down to its own. And then the last question I think you all might have is, you had asked about, okay, it says under planned permanent leadership change, there's language in there that the board shall initiate an internal district-wide assessment of the district's administrative needs, desires. Your question went to, okay, well, who's responsible for doing this? My comment back, and certainly up to you all to discuss, was that I think it's the board who wants to look at what the, to do the assessment, what you all think you want in a superintendent, what challenges, successes, shortcomings, whatever. But I put that out there because that was one of the questions that you had, in case you want to change it.
It's kind of what you did when you hired NESDEC to go out and do some focus groups with families, and when you were doing a very rigorous search for a superintendent several years ago. So I think that's what you've done, and it was the board's direction to do that. I don't think the interpretation is that the board do that, because that's a lot.
Right, and I think that's what my question was around, was, when you have just, it says internal, and I think internal means within the district, and an assessment is a pretty broad task, right? Does it mean we sit down in one meeting and sort of just have a brainstorm session, or do we actually initiate a formalized assessment? So I just kind of called that into question.
I feel like that whole section is just a little too much in the weeds, and I would delete the whole plan leadership change. The top is enough, and it really is up to the current board how they're going to want to go about the process of selecting a superintendent.
Right, because it kind of repeats the initial statement in the purpose, which is that the board shall purposely assess the future leadership needs. And so,
And we even have transition in number 6, so I would just delete that whole section.
the entire section.
Yes.
Yeah, I would too. The only part I was thinking about keeping as I read through that would have been the very last paragraph upon approval of a successor by the board, but it is redundant with item 6
6.
in the plan and the permanent leadership.
Okay.
Yep, I would support that change.
Okay, so we'll delete planned permanent leadership change section.
So I can ask a question?
Of course.
The title of the paragraph and numbers before that are the unplanned permanent leadership change. In a planned permanent leadership change, would we do something differently than this?
An unplanned permanent
Well,
leave?
this says an unplanned permanent
Oh.
leadership change.
I would
Do we
just
need to
change
get rid of
leadership-
unplanned,
Do we
yes.
get rid of
I would just
unplanned?
I would
Because
just
I'm like,
change I would just leadership change.
Yep.
Yeah,
Or
upon the
permanent.
vacant resignation or vacancy of the superintendent covers, if they retire. However, if the vacancy occurs, we would want to
Right.
have a plan similar to that.
Got it.
So I think I'd simplify that.
So what do you want for a title?
Just leadership change.
I
Just
just have-
leadership change?
Yeah,
Okay.
Or
Or permanent leadership
permanent
change.
Permanent
is
leadership
fine.
change,
Okay.
okay.
Just rather
Make sure we
than,
get the right words, okay.
Because really, what we're saying is, we have this section that is the succession plan if there is an absence, but that's not necessarily a permanent change. But then there's also a protocol for if the change is permanent. Okay, so that makes sense to me.
can I ask another question as I read through this? This is for a planned or unplanned permanent absence or continued absence. It doesn't talk about a temporary absence. Would that be a situation that would come up that would be covered in this? Where for a temporary,
That was
say,
my assumption.
6-month period, for whatever reason,
it's a week or
or a week.
it's who's
the
in
next-
charge if there's an emergency and Kathleen is under anesthesia.
Right,
Right.
For an hour.
yes.
And that,
Who's gonna stand up there and say, I am in charge? Yeah.
right, and that was my assumption that that's what paragraph 2 under the
Okay.
administrative succession plan covered, which is in the event of any absence. Then here's the,
Although I don't think you go into the interim superintendent and the original policy was in the event of the absence of the superintendent from the district,
Mhm.
the assistant superintendent will assume the duties.
Right.
And I think that is what we want. Because interim superintendent is somebody the board appoints.
That would be somebody we appointed because timing or whatever.
Right. So it would
required
be,
us to do that.
in the event of the absence of the superintendent, it's the assistant for student services, then the curriculum.
Right.
And then that's it, and then they're not interim.
so maybe that's just the wrong use of that.
Yeah,
term.
because they're not really an interim superintendent. They're,
So remove interim before superintendent in the paragraph, or the sentence.
no, I mean,
The acting superintendent?
yeah, but I don't think if Kathleen is out for a couple of hours, a couple of days, that we need a district-wide and public announcement
No.
or a review their role and duties.
I agree. I don't think we need to call that out here. That is more, implied depending on each case by
It happens
case.
all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm at meetings or
Well-
somewhere else and I'm not right here. And we've had occasion where, Kim was here. Kim
Yeah.
took over
Yeah.
and communicated with me where I was to address an issue. So it's John or Kim. John was not here. John was not in.
So I would delete the second, and to the extent possible, the acting superintendent shall consult with the superintendent. And
call it a day.
call it a day.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, can you point me out where you are exactly? Apologize.
The second section, second paragraph.
Immediately upon?
Yeah.
Yeah, so delete that.
Okay.
And then in the third paragraph, to the extent possible, the acting superintendent shall consult with the superintendent.
Okay, shall
Simplify that sentence. all
consult
the way.
with the, so get rid of interim?
Superintendent on
Yeah.
major decisions.
Okay. Their role and consult with the superintendent, gotcha, okay.
I think it's just, if the superintendent is away for a month for whatever reason, and it's unplanned,
Okay,
you're skiing Mont Blanc, you fall down and your doctor says, you need to take it easy and not contact anybody for a month till, your broken leg heals or something. This would give us the direction, or give the district the direction of, okay, while you're out till you get back, who's in
charge?
Church.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or
And we are
more
eliminating.
pleasantly, if
Right.
you're on a extended conference, you get appointed by the president to serve in a committee for a month, something really good.
But one of my colleagues is out right now. He hit his head and he had a brain bleed, and he's out. He's been out for 6 or 8 weeks now. So that happens.
Yeah.
Well, you get, like I said, you're playing the Thanksgiving football game with the family and you get a concussion.
That's right.
And a concussion is even just a mild concussion is unpredictable in
That's right.
how long you need to just
That's
rest. So I think,
As long as
You
we
gotta
have
take it
a
easier.
process about
Right.
who's in charge,
it's-
and you know who's in charge.
Yeah, and that's really what
that's all.
we wanted, is just when you have
Yeah.
two.
yep, who's first?
So I'm gonna ask the other hard question, or the question that I just, that comes to mind is, why is the assistant superintendent of student services the correct person to take over as opposed to any of the other assistant superintendents? I assume there is a logic behind this.
Well, John had spent more time as assistant superintendent in his previous.
However, this is a policy that could last from, when's this last one
Yeah.
from, 1974 or whatever?
Well,
So is
with the
is
new
there a basis behind it other than is it the most senior? I mean, I guess I'm asking the logic so that we can make a general policy.
Yeah, the decision I made was based on the experience that he had, the experiences he has versus Kim, who had only been in an assistant superintendent's role for a year.
So do we make the part of the policy that,
The
one of the
senior-
duties of the superintendent is to designate the person, or do we make it a set position?
Yeah, I mean, you could have a new superintendent come in and decide that they may
Yeah,
want
they could
somebody
flip.
else,
Yep.
that they may want to designate someone else.
Well, I'm looking at, say, our current, assistant for student services, hits Mega Millions and calls us from, the
Well,
Caribbean
that is
island.
We're
that
having a little
is
too many
yeah.
fantasy scenarios in this
Then it's-
meeting.
I always like to look at the positive rather than get hit by a bus. I haven't hit the
I know.
lottery. And so that may change from time to time because someone retires
It
or
may,
something.
it may. I mean, he could leave tomorrow, and then I would have to make sure that the next in line, which would be the assistant superintendent for curriculum instruction.
So then if you appointed a new assistant superintendent of student services, then would we have to change the policy each time, or would it be better to write in the policy that the succession plan of superintendents is designated?
Well, the
by
only reason
the
it went in
superintendent,
like
by
that
the
was
system.
because I got a sense that you wanted to be able to say who is next in line. And
The
so
last time we
you
met, we
make a
said
good
just pick
point
one.
every time.
Yeah.
Do we have to change it?
Yeah.
I don't-
That is what I want, but I just
Yeah,
wanna make sure we
I know.
word a policy in a way that makes it flexible enough
Yeah.
that we can
How can we put
get
in
what
some
we want out of
flexibility?
this. I mean, is it a previously is one of your first duties as superintendent to designate this, which is in effect until such time as you
Undesignated.
you designate a change, or do we just leave it at this and it always will be the assistant superintendent for student services?
But it might not necessarily be that way. If you have, all of a sudden, you get somebody new in and who hasn't got the experience. Now Kim becomes the more senior member, or in our case, Kim, assistant superintendent.
So we designate our policy, or put it in our policy that we designate the most senior member of the assistant superintendents. I'm just asking the
Yeah.
questions, I don't have a right answer, I'm just trying to throw it for discussion.
Well,
Just all
basically,
things
that's why,
matters.
that's how this was developed.
Mm,
It was the senior member that,
Mhm.
of the two positions.
okay,
So in the absence of the superintendent, the senior assistant superintendent will assume the duties.
You could put
In
it,
the event of the absence of the next, see, now it
And
gets
then we
hard
would
to
need
Well,
to
then
word.
it's
define what
like,
senior
yeah.
means, like
even-
length of
Of
service,
the-
experience.
well, then, you have to define it, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm just looking for something as if
Yep.
we're reading this 3 years from now or 2 years from now, how will we follow it?
I mean, the only other thing you could do is put a line in, should there be changes, the board will, be kept informed of any changes of assignment. You could put that in.
Mm,
In the absence of the superintendent, their duties will be assumed in order of seniority by the assistant superintendents.
By the assistant superintendents in order of seniority. or
By the assistant super, yeah.
So
If
say that
that's
one more
what-
time.
If that were comfortable with that.
Say that one more time.
In the absence of the superintendent,
Yeah.
their duties will be assumed by the assistant superintendents in order of seniority.
And seniority meaning just length of service.
To the Concord School District is the only way I think we
Is
can,
it length of service to the school district or length of service as the assistant superintendent?
as, I would say as the assistant
I
superintendent.
would put it as the assistant superintendent, I think.
Seniority as assistant superintendent.
Did you get that, Kathleen? I'm trying to keep up. I got their duties will be assumed by the assistant superintendent, and then I think you went back and added by the senior.
No, we,
The assistant superintendent
superintendent's
in
order of seniority
In order
as determined by length of time as an assistant superintendent.
Or tenure as assistant
Or tenure.
superintendent
Tenure.
in the Concord School District.
Yeah.
Okay. And
If
the
you wanna smooth that a
Concord
little,
School
I won't be
District.
offended.
Yeah, we'll
Because we
smooth it
kinda-
out a little bit. We
kinda
got the
did that
general,
one.
we have the
Does that
general
sound
gist of it. We'll work on the
Yeah.
verbiage.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
okay.
this was an attempt, this last round was an attempt to have the superintendent kind of pick,
Yeah.
what she would like to happen. And as long as you think that this is also a suitable way to go, then I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I know from experience here on the board that there's always, every communications and policy committee wants to get as much reviewed and revised as possible, but sometimes policies last 6 or 7 years. So I'm just trying to make it so that if things change, our policy is still valid. and
Yep.
Works.
Well, this gives you a clear direction, so.
So we think we're ready to bring this to the full board?
Are you okay with it, with those changes?
I will move that we recommend an amended policy 216 to the board.
And I will second that.
I did the gavel thing.
For first
so
reading.
we're- For first reading, yes.
New on the committee, I don't remember that part.
All right, so motion made and seconded to bring 216 to the full board for first reading. That passes, and we can move on.
Okay.
The vote.
Should we vote?
Oh, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Good call. I couldn't remember if we had. Literally,
I'm like,
I was
I
sitting
feel
here
like we all
thinking,
said
did we
yes.
vote?
That's fine, yes.
No, but I always like to make it a little more formal, just because then we don't end up with
That's
policy
by
211.1 where we all
unanimous
decided.
unanimous
Okay.
decree, we shall move to 16 to the full board.
All right, the next,
Thank you.
the next one, sorry about that. The next one, policy that we're gonna look at in order is number 512. And this is, initially, it was entitled entrance age. And then we went ahead and we wanted to be very specific, and in the change, made it kindergarten entrance age and early admission requests. Again, the initial, or current policy as it stands, as you can see, is very, very short. It's all of about 3 sentences. And so,
There's nothing wrong with short policies.
nope, I agree.
No,
I
they're
agree.
bad.
Yeah, they are, except for some, you're right, in most cases there are. But here, again, I sent this out, Cara, and provided some really great changes, which I did incorporate in here. Everything in red was not included, obviously, in the the current policy. I think one of the questions was asked about, as we're looking at equity and everything else in the district, a birth certificate, and that was one of the things that we had said had to be presented upon confirming the student's date of birth, and one of the questions was, is there any other form? So I looked around, and Form I-94 is what our new Americans they fill out. It's called an arrival departure card when they enter the United States. And then I went ahead and I thought, and I talked to our high school registrar, and that is indeed what they use. And then I thought, there could be other forms. Do we want to be a little broader and say, or other documentation confirming the student's date of birth? So that was one of the changes. The first full red paragraph, I went ahead as recommended. I think it was a good one to, provide a written request, and the question was, should it be in writing or could an email suffice? Kathleen and I talked about that. Her decision, she thought it was better just to keep it broad, any kind of written request that's of record. We went ahead and put in the information as to where to send it. Let's see, the standardized, and then you go down, in May, each child will be administered a standardized school readiness test, and made some minor changes. If they, late period arrival for families, if it happens after April 15th, they can go ahead and get the readiness test, but it has to be prior to August 31st.
I thought we changed the first grade to kindergarten.
That was my question.
Yeah.
It's all
we did.
first grade
If we
references.
looked at parent and guardian requesting early admission, it's in the first red paragraph. I thought we changed all that up to K, kindergarten.
Hang on, parents are working.
I read ahead.
We did.
On the
We
second
did.
page.
It is.
We did,
We
but
did.
we just
We did.
missed it.
We did. I just missed
but
that
it's
one.
also in the third paragraph.
Yeah.
Kindergarten.
Well, just make sure that when we look, there is more, I saw it.
Okay.
It should
Okay.
say kindergarten,
All the
because
way through.
the first graders, it's if a youngster is in a kindergarten program somewhere and then comes to us, and let's say their birth date is October 15th, but they've already been through kindergarten, we're not gonna make them repeat, they're gonna go into first grade. They're gonna be young, we know that, and we'll be observant of that, of course, but this is really around, and the questions we've got, this really came from parents who, the policy was pretty black and white. It was no.
Yeah.
You didn't meet it, right?
Mhm.
And I felt, and the people we talked to in the district, I felt we should have a little bit more flexibility. Our world is a little different now, and there are some youngsters who are ready for school. It isn't just academics, though. It's their whole development. So we would offer a readiness test.
So the
Or
first
kindergarten.
red paragraph should say kindergarten
Yep.
or first grade. However, the next paragraph, the child will be administered a standard school readiness test by the personnel. If the score, that's a first grade test, right?
No,
No.
That's a
kindergarten.
kindergarten test?
Yeah, yep,
So the sixth,
yeah.
so
We're not talking about first
First
grade here,
grade.
we're talking about kindergarten.
So it shouldn't say kindergarten or
So
first
or
grade
first
at
grade.
all.
Just
kindergarten.
kindergarten.
Just kindergarten.
Kindergarten,
Yep.
right.
Okay.
So what if someone comes in and hasn't had kindergarten but wants an early admission to first grade? Does that, because they just skipped kindergarten's not a requirement in this
Right, it's not mandatory in New
It's not
Hampshire.
mandatory, so if someone comes in first grade and their birthday is October the 15th, are they out of luck because they're not included in this policy, or do we
You're
need
right.
to rewrite
We
that
would,
part?
we would follow this policy and give them,
Do they, the standardized readiness test is actually a battery of tests for each particular grade?
Right, they have different levels.
Do we need,
Okay.
we define the entrance ages. So do we need kindergarten in first grade? Because we say parents or guardians requesting early admission, and we could just cut it out.
The only admission standards we have, do we have admission
Yeah,
standards
they're-
for third grade? No, it's somebody who has
it's-
completed second grade, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it really is,
The early entrance shall be 5 and 6, so that's defined. So when we're talking about early admission, we don't have to necessarily do the grades.
Because you're just using the age.
Right.
Because that's what
because you're coming in at 5 or
5,
6.
6.
Right.
And you could be requesting for kindergarten or first grade, and then you don't have to spell it out.
Would there ever be someone coming into second grade that wouldn't be in a current first grade?
Yeah,
No.
honestly, I run into that problem with the military kids whose parents serve overseas. And I've gotten calls from moms saying, we're coming to New Hampshire, they've already been in grade whatever, and, but they don't meet the standard of the age requirement. It wasn't our district, it was another school district, but yes, it does happen. Because but most schools, if a youngster was in first grade in Japan, and they didn't meet our age standard, and they came to us, we would move them into second grade. You would not hold them back another year. You just wouldn't.
Okay, but I'm just.
Why would you repeat?
Say I homeschooled my child for first and second grade, and I'm coming to you and I say, I would like my child to enter third grade. How would you address that? Would
And
you address
the
it in
parent
same-
had done homeschooling in first and second grade,
Yeah,
then they would go to third grade.
okay, so there won't be a test, a
No,
standardized test?
no,
They would
we
just
wouldn't do that.
automatically put in.
Yeah.
Well, that's.
If the child was 6 and the parents said they were very advanced,
Right, and they
Right.
wanted to go to
They're
third grade, that would be a different story.
No, so that's what I'm saying. Say, hey, I started my child learning at 5. You
Yeah.
know, my child's able to read well, and I don't want to put him in first grade. He's young, or she's young, but she's capable of going into second grade. Would this policy? Is this policy designed to cover that, or is that just a freelance policy at that point?
Well, you know what, we would definitely evaluate, I mean, you
Well, I'm
can't,
wondering whether
social
we put
emotional
first,
is
second
just
grade,
as
is
important
put
as,
any early, or just put in early
admission.
admittance,
Entrant,
you know,
Early admission to any grade.
the standard entrance grade for kindergarten shall be 5 years old, and
you could
for
just
first
admit,
grade
you
is
could
6 years
you
old
could take all the
anyway.
grades out and just say, parent
Yeah.
or guardian requesting early admission.
I think
I'm just trying to make it so that it works for anything for
Right.
this,
The
but-
only, I mean, just historically now,
Mhm.
the only place you have this is in kindergarten.
yeah.
I mean, you're not getting it any, I mean,
All right, then I
other
don't
than-
mind. I don't mind putting it in here. I think
Yeah.
all the other things. On the standard out for me is always like anything outside the parameters of this policy, or
I
it
do
will be
think-
handled on a case
I
by case
do
basis.
think
Let's
taking
see
out
what that-
kindergarten and either putting in kindergarten or first grade, or just saying the early admission, because we do have an entrance age for first
Right,
grade.
right, right.
So you could have a kid who went to a private kindergarten who is not sick, wouldn't be 6.
That's right.
So
Okay, so take it out in the first red paragraph to just read, parents or guardians requesting early admission
Yeah.
must
Right.
provide.
That's
Then the
what I
next
would-
time we come up with if you keep going down, the last paragraph on the first page in red, any child who's been enrolled in,
Yeah,
would that be a kindergarten or a first grade? Does not retain the age of 6 or reach the age until.
well, that is talking about somebody who would be eligible to go into first grade, but who had a private kindergarten experience, I think there, who had been enrolled in a kindergarten experience who resided at prior and does not reach 6, because then they would be eligible for first grade.
So it should be kindergarten, not first grade, right?
Well, again, most of the cases are in kindergarten.
So-
There may be an occasion where you have a youngster in a private kindergarten
Yeah.
that didn't follow the same age requirement as we did, and now they finish kindergarten, they go into first, and somebody says, oh my goodness, they're only,
Yeah.
they're not 6 yet.
Right.
So this is, but what you're talking about here is somebody who went to kindergarten in
Yeah.
first grade in that
Right,
example. So the
right.
first line should
Right.
say enrolled in a kindergarten experience.
Yep, okay.
We also had it in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th paragraph, second line. It says automatically be accepted as a first grade student. If the child scores above the 6th level on the standardized.
Right, that was
I
repeated
think we
there.
just automatically be accepted,
Yeah.
period.
Okay. Got it?
And I did have a question about that 6th level in
It's,
terms.
some date, you mean the 6th level of the test? It's
Yeah,
just
or
the-
just like for the
That's
longevity
kind
of
of
the
the cutoff.
policy, is that something that would ever, like,
Well, it could change,
The
as the
language of the
norms
readiness
change, and
test.
that's one of the problems with any kind of as you know. The assessments change the norms, and so they can fluctuate a little bit.
would it
Maybe
be
we shouldn't-
easier if we just said the level set by the district or the minimum standard, or rather than give it a
Yeah.
number,
Well-
or is that a pretty,
I do know that when you're working with a parent, you sometimes need to set that
That level.
level for them so they know what needs to be achieved.
It's very much covered in the superintendent has sole discretion to determine the nature of information used in assessment of the readiness of the child. Says to enter kindergarten, but it would be pretty much the same for first grade, right? Records, documents, interviews, making the
Right.
decision,
Right.
so consider factors such as class size, resources, equity. Well, I guess that would only apply to kindergarten, really, but still.
And some youngsters really soar, if you will, in academics, and we have reading and doing their math and all those concepts, but yet the social emotional piece of them, the maturity level isn't there. So you do have to have a broad sweep of what you're reviewing for documents.
Okay, so that's fine, I'm fine with that.
So just kindergarten, correct? Don't
Yeah.
add
That
first
last
grade?
Yep.
paragraph.
Yep.
Second
Okay.
to last paragraph.
Okay.
Okay.
Do we
This-
have it?
So if we do this and we bring it to the board and we get this through, then this will go into effect for this coming school year.
Yes.
To date, I have not received any requests yet, but I suspect I'll get a few.
I guess the one question I've have is, have we talked to our kindergarten teachers? And
we
whether they
actually-
might have any concerns about this?
Yeah, we actually had a committee to look at that.
Okay.
With Katie and her team out at Millbrook. So, once, tomorrow, we have a principals meeting, so I'm gonna bring this back with the changes, just so they can see what we
But
changed on it.
they have
Yeah, they
seen
had
this
some-
draft?
Yeah,
And they're comfortable with the
Right,
measures that we
yeah.
have enumerated here.
well, as you know now, they're doing, they all do a little kindergarten screening, when we do the little 2-week, or the week where each school does a kindergarten screening, the kids come in, they do, they get book bags and all kinds of stuff, and then they do a screening, which helps them so that they can place them right, really. It's mostly about placing and make sure they don't have all, if they have a group of real young ones, they're not all together, they kind of spread them out a little bit in the classrooms, so.
So they use
and
that
I-
basically to create a diverse
Yeah,
group in each
yeah,
of the
right.
individual classes.
Right, and then you can identify speech and language, occupational OT stuff for the kids, so that those people are there monitoring them. So they do a lot outside of an assessment.
No, I'm happy with this. I think that the existing policy
Yeah,
does not allow for any flexibility, and
Yeah.
I just don't think that's in the best interest of our students, all parents at the time, all the time.
yep.
Kathleen, given that you are meeting on this again, would it be appropriate to table it, or should we?
I think the changes are so minimal that I don't think it makes a big difference, but if I feel that they really I don't know why it would change. This is kind of what they wanted, except for some changes in the grades. I would, if there was some change, I would let you know and pull it. I wouldn't put it, when we meet for executive committee, I would ask that we pull it.
Okay.
I would, yeah.
So I always would do that.
Prefer to bring this for a first reading in the June meeting, so that there'll be a second reading in the July meeting, so someone interested in applying for the school year coming up, that would begin in the end of August, would have an opportunity
Yep.
to do that.
Yeah,
I'll move the amended policy 15112 for a first reading.
I'll second it.
Okay. The motion has been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes.
great. That's something that we've been wanting to do for a while.
Okay.
Awesome. You,
Okay.
do you have all, are you good, Karen?
I think so. I
Okay.
got it. I'm
Okay.
making notes everywhere.
All right.
So, okay, moving forward, we then are going to speak next to policy number 529. I numbered this, and 529.1. This is education of children in foster care. This would be a new policy to the district, and it came about, as you all may recall, 529 is McKinney-Vento, which deals with the homeless children, homeless students. And so when we were having an audit recently, DOE asked, even though it's a recommended policy, they recommended because of the funding issue this falls under, and Kathleen, I forget which, the title, is it Title I? They just said, we want you to have this policy.
Title One.
Title I? Okay, Title I. So they wanted us to have this policy, and so I went ahead and did some research, and I did pull the model from the New Hampshire School Board Association. And so that is why it is all in red, is because it is brand new policy. So that's what's before you.
I did have a question under the definition, the final sentence that mentions that children awaiting foster care may also qualify as homeless under policy 529.
Correct.
Is that stated because a homeless child will receive different attention than a foster care child?
No, they actually receive a lot of the same attention, but it used to be foster care was covered under McKinney-Vento, but
Okay.
it changed, and so now it isn't. It can be covered in some instances, but not in all.
Okay.
But a child could be placed in foster placement, they were attending Christa McAuliffe School, but they live in the Beaver Meadow district. They have the right to stay at Christa McAuliffe. You know, one of the things that we try to do is, as you know, is to keep their placements steady and for the sake of the youngster with their teacher and their peers. So we follow the rules. We kind of follow those rules with the homeless policies. I mean, and this happens, you know, in the drop of a hat, right?
Right.
We don't, all of a sudden, you know, youngsters are moved and changed, and it's quite traumatic for them. So if we can keep them where they are, we're gonna try to do everything we can to do that,
Okay.
including that transportation piece.
And I know this is long. While people are reading it, Karen, you saw my question about the POCs.
POCs.
It's on page 2, Karen, down.
Yep.
What are they? Why are they called POCs?
There's actually somebody
Point of
who's got
contact,
to
that's
be,
what it
yeah,
is,
point of contact.
I
I'm
was
sorry.
like-
You want me to
And it
spell
is
that out?
actually defined in
It-
B,
Yeah.
second sentence.
That's right.
Yep.
There it is. I was looking for it on the wrong page.
Yep.
So yeah, just the way that a particular sentence was phrased, it sounded like the point of contact maybe had multiple duties, because it says the main duty of the foster care POC is to facilitate the prompt and appropriate placement. So does that mean that they have more than one duty?
Yes, our foster care POC is also our McKinney-Vento POC.
Okay.
So this is just like the real grammar nerd in me, but out of district is modifying coordinator and transportation, so it should be hyphenated.
Out of district?
And it's
Where are you?
it's in a couple of places. So when it's before a noun and being used as a modifier, it should be hyphenated. So it's B, the first sentence,
So out, hyphen, of, hyphen,
district.
district, hyphen?
Yep.
No,
Okay.
no.
No
Just out
hyphen.
of district,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Out of district is being treated as almost one descriptor word.
Yeah.
Out of district coordinator.
And then there's another place it was used.
Okay.
I know it's used in the second page too.
Yes, it's
Yep.
the second paragraph from the bottom, last sentence, out of district transportation, so same
Okay,
modification.
thank you. Got it.
I spend a lot of my day
Yes, you do.
adding hyphens to things. I don't teach that in school anymore.
No, they don't.
Got it, okay.
Although the spell checks can do that.
Sometimes they do, yes.
Title one.
This makes it really rolls in nicely with the programs we have for homeless, so it's nice to be able to have a coordinator and also work with these families.
No, it's good. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a meaty policy,
Right.
and I think, I echo my fellow board members and that succinct is best. But even when I was looking through this, there really wasn't anything I would cut. It's all seems pretty necessary language, so I'm good with that.
Okay.
Does anyone else
So,
have any points of
no.
discussion?
I'm good, I'll make the motion to bring Concord School District Policy number 529.1 to the full board for a first reading.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes.
Awesome.
Okay, Jim. Got it, 3-0. Okay.
And I think that Ellen will have to share the policy change with the Department of Ed. That was plan of action was to introduce this policy, so she'll take care of that once you pass it.
Okay, great. All right, the last one we have in front of us tonight is one that you have seen before, at least Jim, you have. We worked on this back, the existing one we worked on, I want to say in 2022? February 2021, sorry. And the legislature has been very busy, and so they made corrections to this, which took effect in May of 2022. And in fact, I can tell you that there were some more changes that were being discussed in front of the legislature, so I wouldn't be surprised if sometime in the very near future we see maybe a couple more small changes. But as you look at our current one and compare it against the one where I actually have the red, you will see that the changes are fairly significant from where we were. We, just to paraphrase a little bit or go through the definition section is, they reorganized the policy, they being the New Hampshire School Board Association. Used to be mostly, we used the 189.13/A, now is 13/A through 13/C. Specifically, with regard to some of the definitions, under the statute, under 189.13A, a covered person is extended far beyond just an applicant for employment. It applies also to designated volunteers, representatives of contractors, student teachers, short-term substitutes, and coaches. So it's much more broad in its application when we talk about a covered employee. Also, a designated volunteer, although 189.13A, it doesn't define a designated volunteers for purposes of this policy, but when we did our volunteer policy, as you will recall, the board decided that they did want all volunteers within the district to sort of be treated like designated volunteers, and that they did want the background criminal records check. So that's one of the things. You'll see that they do spend some time talking about designated volunteers throughout the policy. The other change that came about as a result was in the 22 amendment to RSA 189-13A. It used to be only the superintendent who could receive and review results of the criminal history records check, but now it can be delegated to the assistant superintendent, the business administration, or the HR director. Okay. And that's up to the superintendent to decide who or if we delegate. Let's see. In the 2020 bill, they wanted to provide greater mobility for bus drivers and monitors. So DOE now provides a records check for bus drivers, and they do it every 5 years for bus drivers and monitors. But it doesn't cover non-Section 5 offenses. Section 5 offenses are the ones that will be automatic disqualifiers, okay? And they are delineated in the statute. Let's see. The other big changes were Senate Bill 352 in 2022, a further amended 189-13A. It allowed portability for 3 years of a substitute's criminal history records check among districts within the same SAU. So you could go from school to school to school. If we're not a multi-district SAU, so that you couldn't allow it. But and then in 2021, it used to be that you had to immediately destroy results of a negative test. Now I think you have 10 days. So they further delineated that, and we can add additional crimes if we wanted to in the non-Section 5. I did not, but that does give us that authority if we wanted to for misdemeanor criminal charges that don't fall under Section 5. If we wanted to further delineate, we're allowed to. The other thing is it gave the board direction if you wanted to require the applicant to pay for criminal history background check. We don't, to my knowledge, we don't do that. The SAU does, the district does that. They say it could affect people applying. I hope not for the amount, but it could. And then, let's see. Let's see what else. Those were the big changes. So, but as you look at it on paper, there's a lot more red than there is black. I think it's much tighter, but open to any questions that you may have.
Is it from the state or you that all covered persons are required to undergo training and information relative to child sexual abuse prevention?
They are required to, and in
That's
fact,
state law.
yes.
Okay, and that is where, and I think we have problems with how broad we designate volunteers. Because I'm the volunteer coordinator, Krista McCall. I am not going to get people to do a training to get them to come to an hour
To pop popcorn.
or field day or something like that. It's hard enough getting them to do the background check.
Yep.
And so I think that's where we have to figure out
Who are designated volunteers.
who our designated volunteers are. And I think we can say all volunteers who are coming in contact with students need to have a criminal background check. But I really think we need to limit who we're requiring to take additional training to people who, are basically in the schools all the time, doing educational work. Is the field trip chaperone somebody who needs this training, do we think?
If they're one-on-one with students, yes.
That's required by state law? If they're
Yep.
a field trip would they be one-on-one with students?
Not
that's
necessarily though. Some districts don't determine that they're designated.
Yep.
No.
We did. We took it a step
Right,
further because
right.
we wanted to be super
It's like a
careful.
field day. They don't. They get hundreds of parents who come to field day, and they.
And I'm okay with the background check portion of
Yeah.
that. I
Yeah.
think that's
It's the
fun.
training piece
It's
you're
the
talking about.
training
Yeah.
piece that I think is unrealistic, that, and detrimental to our efforts to
Get people.
get people. And I also think it's going to be widely ignored.
It's hard enough getting them to get fingerprinted.
And it's hard enough for, who's tracking that they're approved
Right.
and they've done their training. I know who tracks, and Chris McAuliffe, like, when we have an event, we send the list to the administrative assistant, she checks it, but, like, is she then responsible for checking that they've undergone this training, and how?
So what I think I hear you saying, Pam, is you want to designate the volunteers further. We need to keep track further on who is considered a designated volunteer versus non for definition of covered persons, because then it goes, if you are technically defined as a covered person, then you have to have that training.
Right.
And we don't want to put the non-designated.
I mean, I think it's appropriate to say that every volunteer that is in contact with students should undergo a background check. I think that, although, you do end up with, like, weird situations where,
Yeah.
like, we're having we have a block party. The vendors don't have to be background checked, but the parents that are distributing the pizza, even though they're not alone with students, have to be background checked. So, the policy gets ridiculous in some ways, but,
Actually, don't we do Raptor on vendors?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it isn't a background, but it is
Yeah.
a Raptor. I gotcha.
yeah.
But I wonder if their block party, if we're running these vendors through
I asked them to last year because it came up. And
when
I-
they had it for their after-school activities?
Yep.
Okay, all right.
So,
But I think the training, we have to figure out
Yeah.
something different.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we're going to figure that out in the next.
Right. Yeah, this is a lot for me. I was really trying to wrap my head around it because, I do know it is very frustrating for, parents to feel excluded, or that there are barriers to just popping by and helping out. And so I felt the same way as I was reading this. I was like, this feels heavy, that volunteers have to undergo this level of
It's
training.
not just, a kid telling you something, it's also other behaviors that you see, and so you have to make people aware of those things.
Mhm.
What does grooming look like? What does, all of those topics. So it isn't just a youngster who confides in you and says, I got hit last night or whatever, I mean, it's so much more than that. That's a tough one, and you don't want, how do you keep people interested in wanting to participate? And now we make it more difficult.
well, I think the only way you can do it is when they come in to do their fingerprinting, or each year when we're looking at them, we figure out what the activity. I know it's Stacy. It's Stacy, right? Who does it? Sarah. Excuse me.
Sarah.
Figure out whether they're if they're just volunteers, not designated volunteers. Because the popcorn poppers, or I used to do the field days.
Yeah.
Or whatever. They're not going to come one-on-one with the kids, so they're not required to go through the background checks, the criminal records check, or the training. But I think we also have to be aware, kind of like we did with that. Remember the photography case where we had
Yeah,
school
photography
photographers
case.
come in and they made comments to one of the students, and they were subcontractor. No, they were a contractor who came in, and we fixed that.
All of these items, and that section needs to be written into any contract that the
Right.
contractor
Oh,
is
I-
required to have conducted these things.
Well, they did, in that case of that photographer, Geskus had done a criminal record check, thank God,
Yes.
and it was clean,
But
at least.
the concern being is that back to school night, the person who's dishing the ice cream out or handing the ice cream sandwiches out to kids who may only be there for that event and the Christmas bazaar where they sell gifts for your parents for under $1, and And then maybe at field day,
Those
you know,
are
your average, this is your average
Yeah.
parents who just volunteers, but not as a tutor or a reading person or a bus monitor or anything that is day to day.
And anything that
And
isn't
that gets tough.
unsupervised by
an adult, another.
a staff
Staff
member
member.
essentially, or other adults, right? So
They do a pretty good job, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Pam. Under designated volunteer, paragraph 7, which goes up to A through D, they do a pretty good job giving description of really what constitutes a designated volunteer for purposes of
On a predictable basis.
yeah,
This
library
probably would
volunteer,
take
overnight
away
field trip.
The ones I was talking about is not a predictable basis. It's
but as you have
occasionally.
pointed out, that we have designated every volunteer.
That's right.
So so
That's
it's
the
not so
problem.
much this.
It's our
It's our
policy,
designation.
It's
Yeah.
our designation policy.
Yeah.
which we can go back and fix under our volunteers, which is a separate policy from this one.
Yeah. So, but I
Yeah.
think we need to look at them together.
I think we should, because I agree with Pam that you don't want to be making your occasional volunteer have to take extensive courses.
I mean, officially, we already are.
Right.
In policy 402, we are officially already saying that they shall complete training every 2 years.
Right.
But again, it's a policy that, without meaning, because I don't think anyone is enforcing it. I do think when it passed,
I was gonna say, you would have to keep records or something
yeah,
of that to make it.
I don't know who enforces.
Keeping
that's-
track is difficult.
The
Yeah.
tracking,
Absolutely,
the fact is when we create a policy, the unseen tracking could
Yeah.
be really onerous.
So I think we sort of have to look at 402, 462, and our
And put
volunteer,
them together.
and our designated volunteer policy, and put them all together.
Should we ask for that for our next communication and policy meeting? Because I think that would be a good thing for us to move forward on.
Got it. Yep.
So
if you
we'll
guys are
bring
okay
back
with
462 and 402. Okay.
But and
No, it's
also
not
the
402, it's, and also the volunteer
Yeah.
one.
yeah,
and
and
the
also the
volunteer.
volunteer
I
one.
don't know.
402 is referenced in this
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, that's,
But
right.
but it's not the volunteer policy.
Okay. So that will be for the
And we'll do that for,
June.
for
June.
June,
No.
right?
And I think the contents of this policy are excellent. We just need to look at it in conjunction with the others to make sure that administering it at the individual school level is practical.
I will, kudos to the principals. They're really pretty good with this. They are very, they watch this and they know they want to have everyone have criminal record checks. So they've been really good about it.
I have a personal anecdote. My husband, at the last minute, wanted to go volunteer for the Earth Day, Arbor Day event at the school, and he got
Rejected.
rejected because he hasn't gone through the process yet. He was like, "Oh man."
Yeah, so they are.
Yeah,
they
they're
do
adhering to
They're
it,
very
for
good.
sure.
And when we used to bring volunteers in, we always had an opening meeting for all the volunteers, and that's when we talked about things like confidentiality and the child abuse policy that we had. So, as a principal, that's what we used to do. So
But those are sort of the volunteers that work for the school.
all the time that they're there.
But yeah, and I think there's like sort of two classes of volunteers. There's the parents that are, parents who are volunteering for the school. Like I did that in kindergarten. I went in and read to the kids once a week. And then there's the parents who are volunteering for school adjacent activities like the PTO and stuff. And they're not reporting to the principal or anything, you know.
Right.
I mean, we had parents who came in and took things home and made, if you had like kindergarten teachers and first grade teachers had cutouts or a lot of things, or maybe packet to put together for stories or whatever, they would do it at home. So they'd pick the materials up and go home, so, yeah. Okay, so we'll have that for the next meeting.
Yep.
Okay, good.
On a related topic, do policies that are getting deleted have to go through a first and second reading?
No, I don't think so. I think they just need a vote of the board.
Because what, going back to what we will have for a second reading for the parental
Objection to course material?
objection to course material, we had discussed deleting the community objection to course material, I can't remember the title.
I'm not remembering the numbers, but I'm remembering exactly what you're
Talking about, and I'm wondering whether we should
51.
make a motion to
560,
do that and
561.
put that before the board at the same time we're having this discussion, so that they're together and not,
Both policies? Yeah.
560, 561,
Yeah.
I believe it is.
Yeah.
Because when I watched the tape, I noticed when it got briefed, we did talk just about 560. 561 didn't come up as far as the citizens piece.
right,
So I think you're right. To ask them to delete it, they have to understand what the nuance is.
and that's why I wonder if we wanna have it as one
Yep.
I'm sorry,
discussion.
650, 651.
Yeah.
A dream policy number, sorry about that. 650, so I'll add that here for the
Well,
notes.
I don't know if we need to take a vote to make that recommendation, or,
To bring both of them to the board at the June meeting.
One is already there for the second
Second
reading.
reading.
And but we'll just bring the other one that we wanna delete.
but we haven't voted to delete it yet, so
Yeah,
I'm
we didn't
saying,
make that recommendation.
so,
We should make a recommendation that
All
it is
right.
deleted upon approval of the
650.
650, yeah.
Are you gonna, my question is, are you gonna brief it? Because I think, in fairness, that will probably bring about some discussion.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
think that's why I think it would make sense to do it at the same time, so we can have that discussion, but others might feel differently.
So do you wanna make a motion to that effect?
Sure, I'll make a motion that this committee, brings, both the approval of 650 and the deletion of 650.1. Am I getting my numbers?
I think
Just
it's
651.
651, sorry. 651, concurrently to the board upon the second reading of the, of policy 650.
Good, got it.
Second.
It's a slow motion,
A very
but it was-
slow motion was seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
So, alright,
That
so we'll
motion
get that done too.
That was a slow motion, but I think we got the numbers all correct and I'm happy with
Next,
This committee brings 650.
next meeting, we, have a couple of policies we wanted to bring in, right, Karen?
Yes,
We wanted,
I really want to bring in
my
field
notes.
trips, believe it or not.
yeah,
That
we
has
wanted
been
to
an
talk
issue.
about looking at the, excuse me, while I go to my notes, I wrote them down. The, animal policy, right, animal,
Comfort animal.
yeah, comfort animal in the classroom policy, we wanna clean that up a little bit. Especially as it relates to, insurance and all that, that we kind of struggled with in the fall, so got it cleaned up, but I think I'd like to bring that to you. So we'll do field trips and that, and then we'll bring back the other ones.
What's the field trip issue?
It's just out of date, and ours is lacking, like first aid, things we need to do with regard to making sure a nurse scans who's going in case they have any medical
Yep,
conditions,
okay.
things like that. So it's
We
we
also
just need
wanna
to
make sure
update
that
it.
Procedure.
people know when the kids leave the campus. So if you leave the campus and you're at Runlet and you're going over to do an activity at Memorial Field, they're technically leaving the school grounds, and so we just wanna make
Make
sure
sure.
that that's incorporated into the
And that they have
policy.
first aid certified.
Right.
And the school, somebody, we have the
Right.
proper number of chaperones. And then just as a coming attraction, because I know y'all will be very excited to hear this.
Yes.
Title IX is under revision right now.
Yeah.
It's out for public
Biggie.
comment.
Huge.
And I get excited about the
Oh.
saddest things. And so that is due out the end of May, and if they do what they did to us 2 years ago, they'll want it in place by August. It's a federal statute. So what we're hoping to do, Kathleen and I were hoping to do, is just present maybe two, well, it looks like we'll really have two new policies, and then we'll bring in the 462 for cleanup with the volunteer policy. But then leave the next one solely for the Title IX, because it is a voluminous, it's huge. That was the first policy I ever worked on. when I came on board, so it's very large.
And you're not expecting to bring that to us until July?
It hasn't even been released. They're hoping for an end of May release date. I'm gonna be on the working committee with the New Hampshire School Board Association, because I was the last time, and I got some inside scoop. And so I will get it to you as soon as, I'll make the changes as we're going. But I just put that on your radar. You know, if we're a month later, are they gonna come and arrest us, the Title IX police? Probably not, but it is a big,
But did
that
the
seems to be
feds have
one.
a public hearing? Is that all done? Public
It's
input?
out for public comment.
It's out for public comment now.
Under the Federal Register, yep,
Okay.
and
I
so
thought
they're
so.
gonna take,
Alright.
they've been taking all those comments, and then they've been putting them back in, and they're supposed to,
I'd have a backup plan.
okay.
Just-
I'm-
My
I'm
federal rules release it, so I wouldn't
Yeah.
schedule our lives around
No,
when they
Yeah.
will get things done.
I'm just thinking this may be a policy we need to consider having just one reading on. If it's,
that's what we
if
did
it
last
needs to
time.
be in place by
Yeah,
the beginning of the school year. And, you know, anything if it's gonna be long, anything we can do to get it in the hands of the board
Yep.
Early
early
on.
would be
We'll
a
do,
good
we'll do
idea.
that.
yep.
The only other policy that we've been bantering around, and I've gotta go back and check, because we wanted to address promotion retention. We have a promotion retention policy, but remember we wanted the criteria laid out in an appendix, for promotion and retention. So that's the other one that's kinda out there that we wanna do. So just know that that one's out there too.
So since we're talking about things in the future, I'm gonna throw out something in that I would like to be able, and it's come up in prior, I'd like to be able to read this coming year's handbook for students at the, we have it for high school, middle school, and I believe for the elementary schools. I'd like to have it accessible so we can read it before the school year starts, just,
Well, we were posting it in your folder.
okay.
So, yes.
I just
we
wanna make
try
sure
to-
that any changes or
'Cause we
anything
need
I
to
get-
about
we
agree
have
We
a
need to
chance
get it to
look at
you
it.
earlier
Yeah.
than when we did, so I'm thinking it should be ready for your August meeting.
Okay, I just wanna make sure that we can read it and be aware of any changes
Yep.
and have a
Yep.
chance to discuss or comment on them.
Yeah,
Because it's come up in the past, and it is always
Right.
something where I
It's
hate to start the school year not having
right,
reviewed a handbook.
No.
Because it's all the real critical things happen that first month anyway on
Right.
a lot of things as
no,
far as establishing.
no, you're right, I think it's in your policy.
I think we're supposed to review it, yeah,
Yeah.
I just want to,
Yep.
and I understand the things that may delay it, because to Pam's point, others who influence us are not as timely always as we would like them to be.
And
but
we
I do
don't
wanna
have
get chance to see
we
it.
won't have a principal, we don't know when we will have a new principal at Runlet, and, yeah.
Right,
I can tell you, the middle school generally takes the high schools and changes,
Yeah.
they're pretty good.
They're
It's the
very
elementary
good.
schools, they're pretty similar, although each of the schools has their own motto and stuff, but the principals did a really
We
good
actually
rewrite
had them
2
work
years
together.
ago. When we had to do the MTSSB discipline due process, so they spent a
Right.
lot of time on that, so they're in much better shape, so.
Okay.
Anything else?
Motion to adjourn.
It's a great motion.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, this meeting is adjourned.